Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul's Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul's Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
And welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked to Watchtowr and Enzo Yiannopoulos about biometrics. Again, I'm your host, Adrian, and I've got John Kinsella with me, and it's time to do the Application Security Weekly news. All right. So, let's see here.
We've got a bunch of meaty stuff this week.
Yeah, I still did not get the page to load over here, so I will use the backup over here. Let me rearrange my windows a little bit, and then we can get going. Yeah, so I noticed we're going to have some similar conversations here between your stuff and my stuff, John. And talking about what AI is going to replace and secure design, this stuff just keeps coming up and keeps coming up. In fact, I'm going to be a guest on a podcast later today where the main thing we're talking about is shifting left and secure by design, which I've already had some rants on secure by design so I guess if we're talking about anything here, we're talking about number 3 for mine. So that's the U.S. government wants devs to stop using C and C++. Of course, the caveat here is it's critical infrastructure, not everywhere, but in general, CISA's been making recommendations to stay away from languages that aren't memory safe. And just the practicality of giving this recommendation, what do you think, John? What do you think the chances are that we can ban any languages of any type effectively, even for a niche like critical infrastructure?
It's not even the banning, because if it was just banning, sure, that's technically not that hard, right? Say, okay, we're not going to use this language. We're not going to develop any new software with this language. That's one thing to say. But to say, hey, all that, millions, if not billions of lines of C and C++ that are out there, you have to go back and rewrite that. That's the part where, good luck, right? We've both had a few articles on this, as you said. CISA's been doing some really interesting stuff around memory safety. Probably one of the earlier voices this year to actually get people thinking about it. It seems like it's really gaining steam over the last month. Not so much as CISA, but just like people talking about this in general.
Yeah.
I had one of the articles I have in here we'll talk about in a few minutes on the same sort of topic. I commented in the show notes. It might sound like we're talking a lot about this, but Adrian, I'm only adding in about 30% of the stories which I'm seeing. There's a bunch of pet projects out there of people writing someone I think at Epic Games has written a memory safe C++ compiler. There's all sorts of stuff going on in this space. So while it sounds like we're talking about this a lot, it's because there's a lot of people talking about it. So, the CISA stuff is interesting. I think if I remember right, when I read that article, they're not saying, in the details, not saying, hey, don't ever use this again. It's like, hey, if you can get away from this is probably a benefit for you. And for
new really projects, I think it specifies new development, right?
Yep.
But there is a lot of stuff out there. Like if you think about Palo Alto and Forrester, these are companies that are coming on 20, 25 years old, and they've got code bases that go back decades now. Like Forta Manager, like some of this vendor code that's out there, even the stuff that's, from a tech company, that's going to be tough to rewrite. I doubt we ever see that stuff rewritten. Every time I use Qualys, I think, wow, has this interface changed in the last 20 years? I don't think it has. But
not much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard sell to tell any organization. I feel like most of the organizations I've worked with, like just getting code out the door can be a struggle. Just getting functional code to land when you want it to. Anything you layer on top of that's just like a wish list, right?
Yeah. I think we saw some orgs this year sort of, they're figuring out the balance of how do they do this. The one coming to mind is Microsoft, where they are rewriting parts of the kernel, which they think are susceptible to issues. They're rewriting those in Rust. But it's a very targeted path, right? It's not like, it's one thing to say that like, hey, we're going to, rewrite a video driver or something in Rust and like a video driver nowadays is not a small thing, right? But it's one thing to say that versus let's go over the next 5 years and rewrite all of Windows. That's just not going to happen. So yeah, that thinking about this for our listeners, like, if you wanted to do something like this, where would you do it? How easy is it to like link Rust into an existing program? That's getting easier. So it's like, how do you sort of tiptoe up to this and not like just go throughout all what's the phrase, the baby with the bathwater and start over?
Yeah, and have you seen anything like, is there any hope that behind the scenes, maybe we can put new tooling into place, like changing out a compiler or something like that and like at least get some of the benefits without having to put the burden directly on developers?
I'm going to take that as a segue and go to my next article, Adrian.
Excellent. I did that on purpose.
One of the ones that I threw in here was Google, their security blog. They've got an article out just last few days talking about retrofitting spatial safety to hundreds of millions of lines of C++. So it was interesting to see how they're talking about memory safety, right? But what they're breaking that down, like they've got a pie chart on their page talking about null pointer dereferencing, thread issues, type-based issues. But then 40% of that overall pie is spatial, by which they mean buffer overflows or underflows or pointer manipulation or that whole sort of category of things. And what they're looking to do is they've gone through and they've got a hardened version of libc++. So for their existing code base, they're basically just swapping out a library, and they're seeing about a third of a percentage point decrease in performance. So that's pretty great. And then in that libc++ library, I think it's lib standard C++. Might have got that wrong, but that's where a lot of their standard either vector or string based manipulations are. And so what they'll do is at that location, they've got bounds checking around anytime those things get used. So it's sort of, it's a perfect example of using a library to improve the security of your application. I don't think they had any real world examples. Don't think they had any sort of stats around what's the improvement about vulnerabilities found. That'll probably come over time. But I thought that was one of the more interesting articles I saw this week on the topic.
Yeah, that's it's exactly what I was asking. So that's perfect. Yeah, and that kind of what was the performance decrease for patching Meltdown Inspector? Like it was like double-digit percentages, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like 1/3 of a percent, that's negligible. That's like a measurement error potentially.
And I'm actually, as I relook at this article real quick, I'm going to correct myself. They are seeing already results out of this. So they're doing some internal red team testing. And with the use of this library, they figured that they've uncovered about 1,000 bugs that would have probably seeing 1,000 to 2,000 bugs a year that they think this is going to fix. So that's for what, 1/3 of a point? That's crazy great. So very cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's, we've got quite a few articles on AI, so let's kind of move in that direction. You've got one that says here, will prompt engineering replace software development? And I think the first place, at least the place I would start there, is this kind of myth that what developers do all day is write code, right? And somehow this can like make them 10x when in reality, like what is a day in a life of a programmer? Like how much of it, could prompts actually impact?
And so to me, this is an interesting topic. I think you've sort of, you're hitting upon a really interesting aspect there, right? Like how much of do like, either my developers or anyone's developers, like actually sit and just code. And I'd say, even if leave the obvious meetings out of it, I think a good chunk of time at least for senior devs is like helping the junior guys get up to speed, or helping them figure out how to solve things, or maybe going in front of a whiteboard, a digital whiteboard, and how to, it's a lot of thinking. People seem to usually enjoy it, but the actual time doing coding can frequently be not as much as you might think. But so there's an article, or an interview, over on Stack Overflow with a, professor, who's got a background in the space, Greg Benson, talking about, okay, well, what does this actually look like? And will prompt engineering replace, which I am incredibly, biased against prompt engineering. I think that the fact that you have to engineer your prompts tells you that this overall system is just like not even close to reality. So it's good for now. We're seeing people get benefits out of it, but I don't think it's if you have to sit and figure out how do you get the thing to do something, that's not working in my mind. But the reason I threw this in here is I thought it's sort of, look at an interview form, from some folks out there that know what they're doing. And, some interesting points in there, like just when they moved from, ChatGPT 4. So they had some code where like it was actually the prompts were written into the software to go and call into ChatGPT. But what they saw, Adrian, when they went from ChatGPT 4 to the new one, O1, that their prompts are actually not working the way they used to work. So they're having to go back and change things. So instead of being rewrite your C and C++ into something else, it's going to be rewrite your prompt into something else instead.
It's another code layer, right?
Yeah.
And
they had some comments.
You always go ahead.
No, I was going to say real quick, they had some comments towards the beginning of like, they were using as an example like SQL, right? The idea of SQL is to try and make it a language which was human readable and understandable, but still could query the database and get what you want out of it. But for anyone who's seen like more than 2 or 3 lines of SQL, they didn't get very far in that exercise.
Yeah, especially once you get joins and stuff. Your SQL statement ends up being like, 500 characters long. Yeah, it gets pretty crazy. But yeah, it's interesting because prompt engineering is its own thing. And like you mentioned, and this is a big challenge for anybody having to do AI red teaming or AI safety, or if you have AI built into your software. If you have LLMs built into your software, just like imagine every time you made a minor update to your database, you potentially had to rewrite queries. That would be madness, right? But that's what we're looking at here. So for if you have an LLM as any part of your software project, you have to build tests for that, and you have to figure out what pass or fail looks like for those tests now. Right.
Yeah.
So that's just it's another layer of code that you now have to manage, and as we've seen with a lot of security products out there, you always have to take into account. Am I putting 30 minutes into something to save 5 minutes? So that's a consideration as well. So
it's got to be an interesting thing. I haven't done any unit testing of an AI or LLM, but that's a really great point, because I don't think of those things as being always having reproducible answers. So you have
they do
how
not.
do you actually check for that
by
in
nature
your unit tests?
So one of the problems I've found with my LLM use is it'll give me the correct answer, but it won't give it to me in a straightforward way. Like sometimes I'll ask it a question and it's like, I don't know the answer to that. And I say, actually, you do know the answer to that. And it's like, you're right, I do. So how do you programmatically give it encouragement and prompt it several times to get the result? And also the fact that, as you point out, you can ask the same question twice, 5 minutes apart, and get different answers because it's non-deterministic. It's just the way that the technology works. So you have to take all that into account when building this into anything.
Yep. I bet someone has to be working on a unit test library out there for this. Have to go look for that.
There are. Yeah. Check out PromptFoo is a good one.
Okay.
That's the one I would recommend. It's already designed to fit into your CI/CD pipeline, and it's designed to work like unit tests. So yeah, prompt foo is a good one.
Oh, cool.
And it's already got some of those like AI safety tests you probably people are going to be required to do, like make sure it's not going to tell somebody how to make napalm and stuff like that. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind, if you're going to do any kind of adversarial prompting, you can get your account shut down. At some places like Anthropic will shut down your account if you start doing that kind of AI safety testing against it. They'll detect it and they'll turn you
tell
off
them ahead of time.
So all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore because you were doing your unit testing.
Yeah, that's that's going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. All right. So other AI stuff we have here. One of them that I had was how does AI improve digital experience monitoring? And it's just kind of writing about new technology. This isn't unique to AI. That just takes all this magical thinking, just because AI can do something really encouraging and positive and like on this small scale, in somebody's mind, they just ramped it up to, this can solve everything now. Let me pull up some of the examples here from this. So the article is how AI changes end user experience optimization and can reinvent IT. And so it's talking about maybe network performance degrades, and then it can go out, figure out the problem, fix the problem with network performance. Like there are so many assumptions you're making there, and there's so many different systems that need to be tied together. It's like this whole I remember when IBM was talking about like self-healing servers at some point in time.
Yep.
It sounds great, and it seems like we have all the technology we need to do that. But once you start trying to implement it, you find very quickly like there's so many nuances that require a human to do something extra, to go figure something out. Or the model changes and now it doesn't work anymore. Now it makes your network performance worse instead of better, right?
It's one of those things that sort of makes you appreciate, some of these people that we work around day to day. Like, we always make the joke about, or at least I do, of like, oh, I can't print, right? That type of thing. And the last thing I want to do, I've said before, is do not make me IT. Don't ask me to fix the printer. I can't stand that. But you're like, oh, well, let's make it LLM. And then you start realizing, oh, do you have to do this and then this and this? There's all these little things in there that there's a lot of organizational knowledge in there.
So do you remember when Microsoft first included those troubleshooters? Like if your internet connection wasn't working, you could just ask it to troubleshoot. And basically what it was doing is it was just like if you called your ISP on the phone, it was the whole checklist of things, minus rebooting the router. Like it was gonna, get a new IP address from DHCP. It was gonna flush the DNS cache. It was gonna, reset the driver and the network services. And you just see it going through this checklist of just refreshing and restarting everything related to the network stack, because most of the time that works, right? So I think that's an example of where, sure, there might be these opportunities for AI to fix stuff when fixing stuff is usually just turning it off and back on again. So why not just have something do that? Like I remember we had this J2EE application that the company I worked for used for application entry for new merchants who wanted to process credit cards. And it had a memory leak. And I tried as I might in the dev environment, I could not reproduce real production traffic, even recording it, replaying it. I could not get memory to leak in the dev environment with the debugger attached. So the way I fixed it is I just created a cron job that restarted the WebSphere instance at 1 a.m. every morning, and probably still doing that today.
I was looking forward to you saying that you did the troubleshooting in prod instead, but I'm disappointed.
No, there's no way to hook a debugger, like not enough resources to even make that work because with Java, you got to hook a debugger to the whole heap, which instantly doubles the amount of resources you need to run it. It was impossible back then. I think there are better solutions now, but we're talking like 2003 maybe that I was doing this, 2002, 2003, and the memory didn't leak so much that we couldn't last a day. Like it was like a day and a half that we get the out of memory error and it would just fill up the heap. But yeah, just restarting it worked. So, maybe there's a bunch of opportunity, but do you even need AI to do that though? So
Well,
again, like a lot of these use cases I see people throw out there, you're like, that's a 3-line Python script. That's not LLMs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't remember the number now. It's what, $100 million, I think it is, to train a ChatGPT model. And now you're going to use it to just turn a switch on and off.
Yeah. So again, I think we got to go back to fundamentals here and think, is this really, because I see a ton of people throwing LLMs at tasks where the LLM is just completely unnecessary. It's a very expensive way of flicking a light switch on and off or something like that.
Well, I think it's, at least for me when I'm playing with them, is I'm trying to get a sense of what can this thing do? Where can I use it? Right. So it's more getting, at least for me right now, it's getting my hands dirty with the technology of going, hey, what can I do with this beast? It's not like, I don't know, I want to train a LLM to, run an Nmap scan. It's like, hey, could you, or what happens when you do that? Or what's sort of the experience like? And try and get my brain to engage in some of those things. So I'm not sure if that's what everyone's doing. I know there's a lot of money being spent, so probably not everyone's sort of screwing around like me. But it's to me, it's when a new technology comes along is how do you sort of get your hands dirty? How do you learn this thing? What does it do? How does it work? And okay, now
you call it screwing around, but it's a very important process. You gotta feel out those edges. You've got to figure out where it's going to fall down, where it's going to blow up, where it's not reliable. You can't just jump straight from a tutorial on a website and decide it's going to go into a production app. We've seen it happen, and we've seen the results when people do that. And so messing around with it first, it's a very important step. And on that topic of messing around with it, I found this article where this guy was like, yeah, you can, the whole container file system, the whole sandboxed Python instance that ChatGPT runs in, you can totally list the files, upload files, download files, run programs. You can just use ChatGPT like a shell environment. And I was like, what? And it was from a couple days ago. So I was like, surely they've patched it or fixed it or something. But this is just fundamentally how ChatGPT works. And you can totally do it. You can tell it to list files in root, in home, in mount data. And you can explore the file system. You can manipulate it. And if you go to their, I forget if they're using HackerOne or BugCrowd, but if you go to their bug bounty, they admit they're like, yeah, you can do stuff in that environment, and that's fine, but that's by design. Don't file anything unless you can break out of that environment, is what they say.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, go ahead.
You can't really do anything with it. It's just kind of cool that you can host files in there, and it's only for that chat instance. It seems like every new ChatGPT chat instance is a new container.
That's one way to do multi-tenancy. It comes back to the whole, a container is not a security construct, so it makes me a little concerned about what's going on there, but interesting.
It is in this case. As far as they're concerned, it is.
We'll have to see as people play more with that. That's we have every 10 or 12 months there's another container escape comes out, so we'll have to see how they're doing. Yeah,
surely. Well, we shouldn't assume, but I would be surprised if they didn't have other stuff in place there to. They've got to be anticipating container escapes.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Let's go back to another one of yours here. So, eliminating CISA altogether. We've seen and heard a lot of this stuff, and CISA gets a couple $1 billion. Like, it is a lot of funding.
Yeah. They have become an established government organization, right? We talk about them. They do a lot of great stuff. I don't want to grab hold of that third rail of politics, especially on a security show. But one of the American politicians who's got sort of a beef against them. So we always think of CISA as like, application security and helping to improve like the, getting people to not, try and get people to not use C and C++. So very sort of an AppSec focus,
Well, they also have a very important role for critical infrastructure too. So yes. they like all day, every day, they're working with like, electrical water treatment plants, places like that to help them out with cybersecurity because they have no security staff.
And another thing that they do is during election cycles is they started attempting to, how will I say, rebuff myths out there of like, yes, of like what's going on or, is the elections being modified or stolen or all those type of things. And this politician is a little unpleased with them over that and saying that they're like, damaging people's First Amendment rights for free speech in the U.S. So yeah, his result is he wants to go and try to defund them.
Well, that's how Chris Krebs, the former head of CISA, got fired, right? Over a tweet, was debunking election myths. Yeah. Yep.
So it's 8 or how many years later, and they still haven't let go of this. But I'm sure some of them have a sincere belief. But yes, this is just an example, right? Like, this is an organization we talk about week after week, probably sometimes go multiple weeks in a row. We have an article from them. And they're super important to a lot of different groups out there, like we've been talking about. But there's people that are going, hey, I don't want that group around. So if they go away, what happens? Who does AppSec? It's not likely this is going to happen, but I want to highlight it there just to sort of, there's always someone out to have a different opinion than you are. And you might think it's just like, oh, AppSec good. Everyone wants this. Not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's a very real chance we could have 2 CISA directors in a row, get fired via tweet. It's weird world that we live in.
Yes, it is. Let's keep going though. I just want to highlight that one. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but at the same time, I think it's important for people to put in the back of their head. Another article I had here, Watchtowr Labs, man, these guys are killing it. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time this year we've talked about some of their research. So I got a blog post here. It's a long one, Adrian. I think it might take longer to read than our half-hour news show here. But
wow, it is. Yeah.
They start off from a point of view of going like, I don't know, let's go find something to look at and see if we can do some security research on it. And hey, there's this thing called, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop. And they start down in the blog post and I'm sure there's more going on beside what's in the blog post. It's been cleaned up, right? But okay, well, what is this thing? Let's start by drawing a box diagram of how the pieces work together and starting to actually learn that system like we were talking about a little bit ago, like, how when you're screwing around, as I said. But so they walk through doing that process here for Citrix. And they're like, it's a pretty complex beast. It does some cool stuff. It's like liked by a lot of enterprises. We don't see a lot of security issues with it, but awfully complex.
Do we? I feel like we do see a lot of Citrix.
I think this is I think we see it on the older software. I'm not sure if it's on this one, but I could be mistaken. Okay. But either way, in this point, it's, they're like, well, they start poking around and learning and trying to understand what it's doing. And they find something they're called a screen recorder, for troubleshooting or security purposes or things like that. And they keep going down and looking around and they find, it's running a Microsoft message queue, which, back to one of your previous comments earlier about, running something without actually doing, testing on it beforehand. Copy and paste into prod. Looks like they copy and paste into prod, leave the HTTP server on. And then next thing you know, they sort of go through this process and they've got a remote code execution without any authentication. So interesting read. It's more focused on the how-to and the thought process and just purely the code itself. But for folks who are learning to sort of get into that mindset, I thought that'd be something worth people studying.
Remote code execution on a VDI environment, that's going to give you access to all kinds of fun data, right?
Yeah.
Basically a bunch of employee workstations.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is getting system level access. So, once you've got that on a Windows box, it's downhill from there.
There's just so much low hanging fruit out there, and it's interesting too because I feel like a lot of it. A lot of people think, Cisco's had VDI for 30 years plus. How has nobody discovered this? I don't know how new the software is, but it's just one of the aspects of enterprise software is like, Google Project Zero doesn't have a license, and $1 million enterprise license to some of the stuff, or, it's not involved in a bug bounty or anything like that. Like there's not a whole lot of people who have turned their eyes on it. So all you need is a group like Watchtowr here, maybe through a client or something like that. They have access to this. And they're like, hey, let's and they probably saw a few things that threw up red flags. They were like, yeah, there's probably something here. We should dig a little deeper. There's a sense that you get when you touch something that it's not very polished, or parts of it are kind of haphazardly thrown together, or it's just way too complex the way it works.
Yeah. Has a smell to it.
Yeah, always fun to do. I don't think there's anything else unless you want to talk about 5 or 6 under mine. 5 was more of a philosophical thing. The idea behind zero standing privileges. Again, is this kind of like secure by design thing where I just don't see a whole lot of practicality to it. Like most security problems can be solved by stripping away everything except the bare minimum, but nobody has time to do that, including privilege management. But I kind of like the article because it's actually debunking myths that zero standing privileges solve everything, right? That are this kind of silver bullet. And they explain, like, one of the examples they give is the CrowdStrike situation, where you still need these break glass credentialed accounts that are going to have shared credentials and stuff like that in a lot of different situations.
It seems like you had a few sort of around identity and I'll usually hand wave and just say AAA, but like identity and authorization. This one you had one also about AWS. And trying to centrally manage root access. It's we've covered on here in the past. I'm sure you have too. It's the number of security controls and features and options in the cloud providers. It's insane, right? So like, how do you know? It's like you were just talking about stripping down those protections. It's the same thing it's worse actually with the cloud providers. I'm curious if there was something about this that caught your eye.
It's just a lot of. I heard about something just the other day where an organization, they're just running a website, had a consultant running a website and had a falling out with that consultant, and it was just a one person in the AWS situation, and he was just running everything under root, and they don't have those credentials now, so they're looking at just having to rebuild their website from scratch, from basically what's published right now, just get it and throw it up somewhere else.
Wow.
But yeah, managing root access is still, I think a big issue for a lot of organizations. So, centrally managing it, I don't fully grok what's going on here, what's new here. But I've never gone real deep on AWS IAM stuff.
I'm not sure myself either on this article. I didn't look at it too closely, but usually ideas with AWS organizations, you're able to, proper guidance is you want to have. It's free to create an account at Amazon, right? AWS. So the idea is to like each little thing you're doing should have its own account, but then you start running into like, okay, how do you manage those? And if you're using AWS Orgs, that allows you to have sort of overall higher sort of centralized management of them. And it looks like they've added the ability to control root from that as well. So if that's what they're doing, and I say this is I don't talk about it in the podcast. I work at AWS, but where I work at AWS is I don't use most of AWS. So this type of thing, I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I wonder how we do that. But yeah, it sounds pretty cool.
And then the last thing I had here, the number one under mine, I did not get a chance to read the full report, but since it's there, I should call it out. There's this, what is the name of the actual group? The website is different from OSC&R. So it's called Open Software Supply Chain Attack Reference, which is a like MITRE attack-like model. But they just released a report called OSC&R in the Wild, a new look at the most common software supply chain exposures. So should be a good report based on 9-month analysis of over 100 million alerts, tens of thousands of code repositories, and 140,000 real-world applications. And I just have not had a chance to dig into that yet.
I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm doing a quick scan over it. It sounds interesting. We might have to try and dig into this one a little bit deeper and come back to it in another episode.
Yeah, and the audience should also. I'd be disappointed if there weren't some interesting findings with numbers like that.
Yep.
All right, and with that, thanks, John, for joining me today. Always fun to go over the news with you.
Yeah, great to see you, man.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to subscribe, share in the socials, check out the show notes. And speaking of stuff the government doesn't want you to do, check out AEON, that's AEON by Evan Marian. Come on back next week on Application Security Weekly and give Mike Shima a warm welcome back.